Have you ever felt small in front of someone? Not physically, but as if their presence, a single careless word, or even just a glance had the power to shrink you into something less than who you are. It's like standing in front of a distorted mirror, the kind you find at carnival, one that bends your reflection and makes you appear smaller, weaker, or misshapen. And the most painful part is that, little by little, you begin to believe that this warped reflection is a truth. You start carrying it with you into every interaction, into every decision, until the image others project becomes the image you hold of yourself. Day after day, it feels as if the world is quietly reminding you that you are not enough. Think about how often this happens in small, almost invisible ways. You speak up in a meeting at work, but someone dismisses your idea with a smirk, and suddenly your voice feels like it carries no weight. You walk into a room confident, only to catch a sideways glance that makes you second-guess the way you're dressed, the way you speak, even the way you move. You share a dream with a friend, and instead of encouragement, they offer a laugh, and now that dream feels foolish. It doesn't take much to make us doubt ourselves. One comment, one silence, one subtle rejection can feel like proof that the distorted mirror is real. Carl Jung spent his life studying the hidden layers of the human mind, and what he discovered is both unsettling and liberating. He realized that much of our suffering doesn't come from life itself, but from the way we allow these distorted mirrors to define us. We bend ourselves into shapes that don't fit. Wear masks that suffocate, silence truths that ache to be spoken, all to avoid rejection or disapproval. We adjust our tone, our posture, our opinions, even our values just to keep the peace. Have you noticed how quickly we shrink ourselves to match the energy in the room? We laugh at jokes that wound us. We nod at decisions we disagree with. We keep quiet when something in us is screaming to speak. This is a tragedy and the clue, because here's the secret. You were never meant to live reduced. Jung believed that within every human being there is a hidden wholeness, a reservoir of strength, wisdom, and authenticity that waits to be remembered. He called the journey back to that wholeness individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond masks, beyond projections, beyond the prison of feeling small. Imagine carrying a seed in your pocket your entire life, not realize it had the power to grow into a tree with roots deep enough to hold you steady and branches wide enough to offer shade to others. That seed is already inside you. That seed is your true self. And yet, if this is real, if the seed of totality lives within us, why is it so hard to trust it? Why do we so often trade our vastness for the safety of being small? Part of the answer lies in the persona, the mask Jung said we create to survive in society. The mask helps us fit in, protects us from criticism, and smooths the edges of who we are. But over time, we forget the difference between mask and face. The performance becomes the person. The reflection becomes a reality. And slowly, quietly, we lose touch with our own depth. Think back on the moments you worn that mask. Smiling when your heart was heavy. Saying yes when everything in you longed to say no. Pretending to be fine because you didn't want to burden anyone with your truth. At first, these moments feel harmless, even necessary. But if repeated often enough, they carve a hollow space inside you. The authentic laughter, the real no, the tears you needed to release, all of them are pushed into the shadows. And you begin to live not as yourself, but as the echo of who others expect you to be. So here's the question that matters. What reflection will you choose to believe? The distorted mirror that reduces you, or the hidden wholeness that calls you? Jung's promise, and the reason his work still speaks to us today, is that you are not condemned to live in the prison of smallness. You can wake up. You can remember that the distorted reflection was never your true face. But here's where the tension builds. If the seed of wholeness is real, if the light is already inside you, why is it so easy to cling to the distortion and so difficult to trust the reality of your own strength? Carl Jung taught that every one of us carries a persona, the social mask we present to the world. Without it, we couldn't function in society. We needed to work, to connect, to play our roles. But here's the danger. When we mistake the mask for our true face, we begin to lose sight of who we really are. The persona becomes not just a tool, but a prison. It's like wearing a costume for so long that you forget the skin beneath it. At first, it feels protective, even empowering. People smile. They accept you. They applaud the performance. But deep down, a quiet voice whispers that something is missing. Picture a young woman who walks into her office every morning with a bright smile. She greets her coworkers warmly. She laughs at every joke, and she never complains. On the outside, she seems effortless, cheerful, dependable. Yet every evening, when she closes her apartment door, her body collapses. The smile fades, her face sags with exhaustion, and the silence in her living room feels like a confession. She realizes she doesn't even know what her real smile looks like anymore, because she's worn the mask of cheerfulness for so long it has blurred into her identity. That is the trap of the persona. It promises safety, but steals authenticity. And this trap doesn't only happen at work. Think about how often you wear different masks in different places. The responsible one at home, the agreeable one among friends, the unshakable one on social media. Each mask helps you belong, but the cost is forgetting the person behind them. You may even begin to feel anxious without the mask, as if your raw self isn't enough, as if showing your real emotions would break the fragile acceptance you've worked so hard to maintain. Have you ever caught yourself laughing when something wasn't funny, or nodding when your heart wanted to say no? That's a persona at work, editing you in real time, cutting out the pieces that don't fit the script. Jung understood this tension deeply. He never said we should throw away the persona altogether. Society requires it. We can't move through life completely unmasked. But he warned that when we identify too strongly with it, we shrink. We live only as a fragment of who we are. It's like staring into a mirror and only seeing one side of your face. At first, it seems functional, but after a while, it starts to feel hollow. Something in you longs to be whole, to breathe without pretending, to rest without performing. The real danger isn't in wearing the mask. The danger is in believing that the mask is all you are. When that happens, the deeper parts of you, the tired, the grieving, the passionate, the angry, the creative, the spiritual, are pushed into hiding. And those parts don't disappear. They gather in the shadows, waiting for their turn. Sometimes they show up as restlessness, sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as a deep sadness you can't explain. It's your soul's way of reminding you that you are more than the role you play. So ask yourself, where in your life do you wear masks so often that you forget what's underneath? Have you ever noticed how heavy it feels to keep performing, how exhausting it is to keep smiling, agreeing, and bending when what you really want is to just be? The persona is useful, but it is not the whole story of you. And sooner or later, life has a way of demanding more. The question is, what happens when circumstances strip the mask away? When life calls you not to be a fragment, but to be whole? This feeling of being small rarely announces itself loudly. It slips in quietly, disguising itself as politeness, as responsibility, even as kindness. You silence yourself in the face of unfair criticism, telling yourself it's not worth the fight. You smile when your whole body wants to say no, because you fear rejection more than discomfort. You work twice as hard, chasing approval that barely arrives, and even when it does, it feels hollow. Slowly, piece by piece, the space for your own truth begins to shrink. You become an expert at pleasing, but a stranger to your own soul. Carl Jung once wrote, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And this is a hidden mechanism at play. When your gaze is fixed outward on the opinions, judgments, and expectations of others, you never awaken to your real size. Your worth becomes a reflection of other people's moods, your confidence a fragile mirror that cracks with every frown. Instead of living from the fullness of your being, you live as a reaction to the shifting winds around you. And because those winds are never steady, your sense of self never feels safe. Maybe you've seen this in your own life. At work, you push yourself to exhaustion, yet the recognition you crave doesn't come. In your family, you carry burdens silently because you don't want to disappoint. In friendships, you listen endlessly but hesitate to share your own struggles, afraid they might turn away. You give and give, but deep down, you feel it's never enough. And the more you give, the smaller you feel. This is how the trap tightens. The more you try to earn love or approval, the more you forget that you were already worthy of it. Think of it like a clock that's been wound too tightly. Each tick becomes heavier, each second louder, until the mechanism inside strains under pressure. Eventually it will break, not because the clock wasn't strong, but because it was never meant to run at that pace forever. The same happens to the soul. When you live only for the gaze of others, your inner mechanism begins to strain. Restlessness grows. Anxiety whispers. Sleep no longer restores you. And without realizing it, you begin to dream your way through life instead of awakening to it. There's another layer here, one Jung saw clearly. When you always look outward, you begin to measure your value through comparisons. Someone else's success makes you feel smaller. Their rejection feels like evidence that you are unworthy. Their silence feels like condemnation. In this way, the world becomes a distorted mirror room, reflecting not who you are, but how others react to you. And because you've forgotten to look inward, you mistake every reflection for truth. The tragedy is that this pattern often hides under noble disguises. You tell yourself you're just being kind, just being responsible, just being flexible. But kindness without boundaries drains you. Responsibility without balance crushes you. Flexibility without truth bends you until you no longer recognize yourself. This is the secret mechanism of smallness. It wears a mask of virtue while quietly erasing your essence. And maybe you've noticed it. The way your voice shakes when you want to speak but stays silent. The way your chest tightens when you agree to something you don't want to do. The way you lie awake replaying a conversation, wishing you had stood up for yourself. These aren't random moments. They are signals. Your inner self tugging at your sleeve, begging you to turn inward. Because until you do, the cycle repeats. You dream other people's dreams, but never awaken to your own. But here's the sobering truth Jung left us. The danger of living this way goes beyond exhaustion or frustration. There is a far greater cost to continually abandoning yourself for the sake of approval. And Jung warned us, again and again, about what happens when the soul is forced to live in shadows. If you never question the distorted mirror, you end up living a borrowed life. Day after day, you slip further from your own center until the voice inside you grows faint, like an echo in a room you rarely visit. Your laughter feels rehearsed. Your words sound safe, but hollow. Even your body begins to rebel. Tight shoulders, shallow breaths, a heaviness in your chest that no amount of rest seems to lift. It is the weight of carrying an existence that was never yours to carry. And the cost is not just emotional. It's physical, spiritual, and relational. Anxiety creeps in like a shadow that lingers no matter how bright the day. Loneliness deepens, even when you're surrounded by people, because deep down you know they don't see you, only the mask. Your energy drains faster than you can replenish it, because pretending is exhausting. The smile you wear in public becomes so disconnected from your inner world that, at night, when the mask finally falls, you barely recognize yourself in the mirror. This is not living, it's surviving. Jung warned us of this silent danger. When we accept the distortion long enough, we begin to confuse it with destiny. We whisper to ourselves, maybe I was never meant to be more. Maybe this smallness is just who I am. And that is the true tragedy. Because once you believe the prison is your home, you stop looking for the door. You settle for crumbs of validation when you were made for abundance. You cling to scraps of approval when you were designed for love. You wait endlessly for a nod, a smile, a word from someone else to confirm your worth, never realizing that your worth was never theirs to give. It's like wandering in an endless desert, desperate for a drop of water that never satisfies. The more you search outward, the drier you feel inside. Approval becomes addictive, but it never quenches. You think, if I just work harder, if I just please more, if I just adjust a little further. But the oasis you chase is always a mirage. And eventually, exhaustion takes over. You wake up in the morning and feel tired before the day begins. You go to bed at night, and your mind keeps running, questioning, doubting, replaying. The emptiness grows until you wonder if this is all there is. But here's the paradox. Within the desert, Jung believed there is always a hidden seed. Even in the driest places, life is a way of hiding its possibilities. Buried under the sand, invisible to the eye, something waits for the right conditions to break open. This is a mystery of the human spirit. It can carry within the potential to flourish even when everything around looks barren. And this is why Jung's insights are not just psychological. They are profoundly spiritual. They remind us that despair is never the full story. Even when you feel like nothing but dust and dryness, a seed of transformation lies quietly within. The question, then, is not whether the seed exists, but how to find it. How do you uncover possibility when everything around you insists on shrinking you? How do you remember your strength when the world tells you you're weak? How do you believe in your wholeness when the mirror insists you're broken? These are not abstract questions. They are the turning points of a life. Because the moment you dare to ask them, something begins to stir inside you. The faintest hint that the desert may not be the end of your story. But here's the challenge that lingers. How do you take the first step toward that hidden seed when all you've known is a barrenness of smallness? How do you find a path back to yourself when every voice around seems to push you deeper into the desert? Jung called the journey back to your wholeness individuation. It is the process of gathering the scattered pieces of yourself and bringing them home to the center. It's not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you always were beneath the masks, the distortions, the borrowed identities. Think of it as taking a shattered mirror and carefully fitting the fragments together again. Not to erase the cracks, but to see your full reflection with honesty and grace. Individuation is not a luxury for a few. It is the essential path for anyone who longs to live as a whole person rather than as a fragment. The beauty of this path is that it doesn't require dramatic gestures. It begins with small but powerful steps. The first is recognition. You can't change what you refuse to see. So notice the places where you shrink to fit. Notice the conversations where your voice goes quiet. Notice the roles you play that feel more like performances than truths. Awareness itself is the spark. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. The furniture doesn't change, but now you can see where you're bumping into things. The second step is integration. This is where most people hesitate, because it requires facing the parts of yourself you've hidden. Jung called these hidden aspects of shadow, the anger you suppress, the sadness you deny, the desires you feel ashamed of. Integration doesn't mean acting out those shadows blindly. It means acknowledging them, bringing them out of hiding, and saying, you belong here too. Imagine a family table where every part of you has a seat, the joyful, the fearful, the ambitious, the wounded. To integrate is to let them sit together, instead of locking some away in the basement of your soul. Then comes conscious action. This is where the inner work takes physical form. You don't need grand transformations. You need small, deliberate acts that realign you with your true self. Saying no without apology when something violates your peace. Writing your thoughts in a journal so your inner voice grows stronger. Practicing silence before responding. Giving yourself room to choose rather than react. These are not insignificant gestures. They are seeds. Each one plants roots of authenticity in your daily life. And over time, those roots become unshakable. Finally, there is legacy. Individuation is not just for you. As you live more authentically, you become a mirror for others. Not the distorted kind that shrinks them, but the clear kind that reminds them of their own wholeness. Your courage to be yourself gives permission for others to drop their masks. Your choice to set boundaries teaches others that it's safe to honor their own. Your decision to stop shrinking plants seeds of strength in those who watch you. In this way, individuation becomes not only your healing, but a ripple of transformation that extends beyond you. And yet, Jung also warned that the path of individuation is not smooth. Before true integration, there are traps, subtle detours that can pull you away from your center. It is not enough to name the steps. You must also be aware of the forces that conspire to keep you small. Because as soon as you begin to awaken, the old patterns rise up to test your resolve. And if you are not watchful, you may mistake the test for failure. On the path of growth, many people stumble into traps that can quietly undo their progress. Jung warned that individuation is not just about finding freedom. It's about learning how to carry it wisely. The first trap is ego inflation. This happens when a mask is dropped and suddenly you feel liberated. But instead of grounding yourself in humility, you mistake this freedom for superiority. You start thinking, I finally see the truth and everyone else is blind. What once was a journey into wholeness turns into a throne of arrogance. The ego disguises itself as enlightenment, but in reality, it's just another mask, more dangerous because it feels so real. The second trap is isolation. Growth can be so intimate, so raw, that you might be tempted to retreat from the world altogether. You tell yourself, I don't need anyone. I can do this on my own. But individuation doesn't mean cutting ties with humanity. It means engaging with authentically. Without relationship, we can't see ourselves clearly. Others reflect us back to ourselves, not always kindly, but often truthfully. To isolate is to deny yourself those mirrors, to retreat into a bubble where growth turns into stagnation. Then there's the savior complex, the third trap. It often appears noble, but beneath it lies avoidance. You throw yourself into fixing others, offering advice, carrying burdens, pouring out energy, all the while neglecting your own soul. It feels good to play healer, but if you never stop to heal yourself, you burn out. Jung believed that before we can guide others, we must first learn to stand on our own ground. Otherwise, helping becomes a distraction that keeps us from facing our own shadows. History itself offers sobering reminders of these dangers. Nietzsche, a brilliant mind who saw too deeply into the abyss, was consumed by it. His insights shattered him because he lacked a grounding to hold them. On the other hand, Meister Eckhart, a mystic who also gazed inward, found a way to hold the weight of existence differently. He discovered silence, balance, the spirit as anchor. The difference is striking. One descended into madness, the other into peace. It is a reminder that knowledge alone is not enough. Without grounding in spirit, the path of individuation can collapse under its own weight. So how do you avoid these traps? By practicing balance. By remembering that freedom without humility is arrogance, growth without connection is isolation, and love without self-awareness is self-destruction. By checking your motives. Am I speaking from wholeness or from pride? Am I retreating to nourish myself or to hide? Am I helping because it flows from my fullness or because I'm avoiding my emptiness? These questions are simple, but they guard the path, because when you learn to recognize and step around these pitfalls, something extraordinary begins to happen. The illusions fall away. The masks no longer tempt you. The shadows no longer terrify you. And in their place, something entirely new emerges. Something real, steady, unshakable. It is the birth of a self that no longer needs to shrink, no longer needs to pretend, no longer fears the mirror. This is a turning point, the quiet miracle of rebirth. For so long, you carried the weight of believing you were small. But now, something breaks open inside you. You realize the sense of inferiority was never the truth. It was only a shadow, a projection, a distorted mirror that finally shatters like old glass. The silence that once felt like emptiness now feels like fullness. The heaviness you carried transforms into wings. And for the first time, you don't need to perform, don't need to shrink, don't need to beg for approval. You can simply be. Rebirth doesn't make you bigger than anyone else. It makes you whole. You no longer compare yourself, because the mirror no longer defines you. You no longer chase approval, because you already carry your own worth. You walk differently, not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer bending to fit into it. You are standing in your own center. This is not arrogance. It is freedom. It is the seed of your soul breaking through the dark soil and touching light for the very first time. Picture that seed. For weeks, maybe months, it looked like nothing was happening. Buried underground, surrounded by darkness, pressed on all sides, it seemed lifeless. But deep within, a silent transformation was taking place. The shell cracked, roots stretched downward, searching for water. And then, at the right moment, the tender shoot broke the surface. That is you. What looked like endings were only beginnings. What felt like silence was only preparation. What you thought was smallness was the soil where your true strength was planted. This is the essence of Jung's promise. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about embracing your shadows, reclaiming your truth, and stepping into the fullness of your being. It's about remembering that you were never broken. You were simply unfinished. And now, the work of your soul is unfolding. And so, The moral of this journey can be said in one clear line. You were not born to fit in. You were born to flourish whole. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to take a simple but powerful step. Write in the comments, "I choose my peace." Let it be your declaration, your first conscious act of individuation in this moment. And don't stop here. Stay with me for the next video, where we'll dive deeper into another secret from Jung's wisdom, one that will guide you even further into a life of freedom, authenticity, and inner peace.